Okay, so the claim that I'm going to be refuting is that TV can lead to violent behavior in our nation's youth. The main points I'm going to be going over are the flaws in statistics, the lack of examples, and the counter-arguments to finish it off. Now, first off with the stats, let's go over the first one. Children aged 2 to 5 spend over 32 hours a week watching TV. Now, the problem with this is not all 32 hours are spent watching cable TV. A good majority of it is on other devices like DVR, DVDs, and gaming consoles. The stats showed that cable TV was shown for 24 of those 32 hours. Now, the problem with this was that the statistic was taken in October 26, 2009. Now, that might not seem like a long time ago, but as most of you know, cable TV or satellite TV is going down way faster than you might think, and they're being overthrown by companies like Netflix, Hulu, and so that stat is, I guarantee you by now, would be way different. The next thing I would like to go over are the lack of examples. Because of the lack of examples throughout the speech, you're not able to make any connections between the primary claims and the statistics being given. For instance, 71% of people aged 8 to 12 and 8 to 18 have a TV in their room. After the statistic is given, there's no backing of this. There's no examples given to make direct correlations between the two. It's basically a fact that's just been thrown out for the audience to interpret. This happens constantly throughout the speech. Just random facts or random stats are given, and it's hard to make connections. And though there might have been numerous cases in which television caused violent behavior, none were listed nor mentioned throughout the presentation. Lastly, to finish it off with counter-arguments, there are no positive ways to identify correlations between the violence in TV and the violence in our youth. There's so many factors that can influence violence. To me, TV is almost insignificant. Just looking at different places where, let's say, TV might be more popular, particularly you don't see violence in our youth to say where places do have a lot of TV. Say, let's just name a random city, LA. How much access do they have to TV and how violent are their youth, as opposed to maybe Yorba Linda, where they can watch all the TV they want. To me, I think the influences come from around you, personally your friends, your family. I think that TV is an insignificant, almost an insignificant factor that can cause violence. Now, just to recap, to go over everything, the weaknesses in statistics and primarily the lack of examples, which made supporting the argument way more difficult. And lastly, there are so many other influences that TV is almost insufficient to the grand scheme of things. Thank you.
All right, Blake, what you do is you kind of preview your arguments instead of reminding us about what the claims are that you're responding to, which makes it a little complicated because we're having to infer what the actual claim was that the advocate presented based on the response that you're giving. On the first point, I think you do a little bit better job on that, but your argument here basically is a challenge to the relevance of cable TV. The advocate doesn't, whether or not it's cable television that they're watching, it's the programming that is the argument that it has its influence because it's the amount of violence in the programming and the number of hours that people watch it. How it's delivered, I'm not exactly sure why that matters. You spend a lot of time challenging that statistic and even presenting an argument that says, well, cable TV has less influence. You know, if I was responding to this myself and I was coming back, I said, oh, that's great. So now, Netflix and Hulu are replacing cable TV, and they're more likely to show the more violent kinds of programming than you're going to get on basic cable. So people lose the HGTV that might have had some non-violent programming on it, and it's replaced with The Sopranos or Walking Dead or whatever it is that people are watching on these other shows that have all the violence. And I don't know that gets you anything on that challenge. That just feels like it's, here's a piece of information that I've grabbed onto and I'm going to respond to without thinking about how that information really is relevant to the claim. And that's what you need to do when you're looking at the arguments, is you need to find how the argument is relevant to the claim that the advocate's presenting. Even if you are correct that there's not as much TV watching or that the cable has changed, does that mean that there is no relationship, or that those people who do watch TV are not affected by what's on the programming? You say that there aren't any examples, and the advocate gives some random statistics and information. Again, this is one of those places where it's a little bit hard because you're not summarizing what the advocate's claims are completely. At the beginning, it does seem to me, as I recall, that there was information about the relationship between violence and television, and of course that there's a high amount of consumption. And your challenge is mostly to the consumption issue and not to the relationship issue. It's not until you get to the last point that you're talking about where you challenge the relationship. The fact that they don't have an example, I don't know how you get an example of somebody, I guess, they watched too much Sopranos and went out and did a murder just like they did on The Sopranos, or they saw some violent act on TV and emulated it. I guess that's the kind of example that you're talking about here. I don't think that that's the inference that the advocate is talking about, that people mimic what they see on television. I think it's that they change their attitudes about violence, or that they see it as being appropriate, and so they develop violent tendencies, or they see that as the solution to their problems and are more likely to engage in that as a consequence. So I'm not sure that the lack of examples does much to challenge the legitimacy of the claim. Now, the last claim that you are making, I think that's probably where you have the strongest reasoning challenge, but you don't have any information on it. You challenge the relationship of TV to violence, and you basically say, well, there are all these other things that could possibly explain it, but I don't get any information that anything else is likely to explain it. It's just your assertion. I think there probably are a lot of things that are more likely to explain it, but you need to prove that. All right, so for instance, if poverty is a stronger contributor to that, if the family that you grow up in is a stronger contributor to that, if the use of drugs is a stronger contributor to that, all of those things, if they are unrelated to television consumption, are more likely to have an impact on this than television. I think that diminishes the claim a little bit more, and you need some proof on those particular points. And all we've got is assertions on these things. Your hypothetical example of whether they watch more or less TV in Los Angeles versus Yorba Linda, I don't know that that's necessarily useful. I kind of understand your argument here that says we're looking at a different study base, but if the advocate's evidence is all based on television consumption regardless of location, and that's what the link is, I'm not sure that what the geographic distribution is matters that much. You can live in Yorba Linda and commit crime after watching TV. I mean, that it doesn't make much sense to me. All right. Yeah, I know there's no crime in Yorba Linda, right?